Issue 277. We start out with some people being bitter that the people of Splash Hill did nothing to fight the Badniks while Starlight Zone suffered, so the bad guy wants to make the people of Splash Hill become the Badniks that will destroy their own zone, with one of the people tied to the others looking kinda like Antoine. I understand why the villains are doing this, they're spiteful, so much so that the hypocrisy of turning other people into Badniks doesn't even occur to them. A text box says that dozens of people are at risk of being Badnikified, and it's not Sonic who can save them apparently, as he's sitting at a table because of Pigmobian showing him a graph talking about why the post-war Freedom Fighter base should remain in Metropolis Zone, and how he'll reward them for it. Naturally, Sonic's really bored at this. We see Tails dodging a laser shot at him by a soldier of the Starlight Liberation Front, and I like that he's stuttering, intimidated of him. It really drives the point home that people have recognized Tails as a capable hero even after Sonic came back. We see that Tails has been helping free people from the soldiers, attacking them so he can get them out of the animal capsules. Suddenly, we see a Birdmobian talk to Vermin from the other end of camera footage monitors, saying that he needs more prison eggs, and Vermin says that the price has gone up, and he's the one giving the enemy money, sarcastically calling him a war hero. The bird says that with the doctor gone, Vermin's the lesser evil, and this zone's fought a siege for months, and after everything they suffered, they get nothing but outsiders moving in and demands for aid. Vermin gets bored and ends the call. Sonic's told about the bird guy, Kaw, being shown what he said about Vermin by a hologram where the guy says the Sith will show them the price for insults. Sonic calls him a loser, and Tails says that he's a loser who turned people in 3 different zones into Badniks just to make a base. So naturally he wants to find the Sith base to punish them for it. It's charming that we see both Kintobors at once saying the same line at once, since naturally they're on the same wavelength. And they think about a plan together. Tails says to Sonic that they didn't need him to come back after all, as if that's supposed to be a reassuring, nice thing to say to him. At least he's gotten gutsy enough to kinda elbow him and tease him, showing that he's growing up since Fleetway Tails was always so meek. They all look at a GPS map with a red arrow on it, and they're told that prison eggs have a GPS signal that shows Badniks where to make pickups. Makes sense. So any large store of them at Starlight Zone has to be the Sith. Okay, there's 2 Kintobors here, so can I just call the former Eggman Eggman? Because having 2 different characters with the same name will be pretty confusing. What are the characters in universe doing about this? Are they seriously calling both of them by the same name? I love that Eggman's angsting about how he used to be evil, saying, "Nobody but me would." And Sonic puts his hand on his shoulder compassionately and says that Robotnik wasn't really his true self and is all in the past. Even Fleetway Sonic's forgetting like that. I love that right afterwards he says, "Now let's put someone else in the past." That was a great line. Sadly, Tails actually thinks it's not a good line, insulting him for it. And Sonic Lampshades got real cocky since the war, haven't you? Being annoyed at him. This is a much better dynamic for them. Fleetway Sonic is the only Sonic who's enough of a jerk to Tails to really deserve Tails being snarky to him. While in Colors in Lost World, Tails just looked like an ungrateful brat. Here is Tails getting his revenge finally, and in a way that's not actively evil and risking losing the audience's sympathy. Oh good, this is actually expanded on. Tails looks really sad and says, "Oh right, sorry, I don't mean to," whispering the first 2 words, going back to his humble meek self. And then Sonic says, "It wasn't a complaint, Pixel Brain. Everything you've done, you should be cocky. You and Kintobor both." Aww. It really shows how far the 2 have come. It makes sense that Tails has earned Sonic's respect. And it's good of Sonic to do this instead of simply leaving it at complaining about Tails' confidence, like he always left it at in earlier issues. Even him calling him Pixel Brain has become just a tame nickname now, rather than an expression of total disrespect for him, since he's not calling him an outright idiot. A minute later, in Starlight Zone, which looks nothing like Starlight Zone, Sonic and Tails break a hole in a building's wall to break into Kaw's base. Kaw's not here though because it's not the end of the story yet. So the heroes beat the goons, who run away with Sonic calling them wimps like a bully, and Tails looks really sad that Caw was out on a mission. I love that expression of his. Kintobor is asked, oh, the heroes say Kintobors. Eggman says he can pick up an individual prison egg and gets worried. Then we cut to a hippie dog girl holding a picket sign saying that Splash Hill is way cool with Sonic having a thumbs up next to a mansion on the sign. I forgot to mention earlier, but I love that they made even a zone from Sonic 4 a canon geographical location in this comic. The woman is asked if she's worried this may bring villains to the zone as well as tourists, lampshading it. And she says that there's always a villain out to get them, being genre savvy, so she might as well have made the interview. It makes sense that she wants Splash Hill to get as famous as Emerald Hill by making the heroes move their HQ here. Why would they though? Their old location was fine. I don't like that she said, this is Mobius though, as if she's an alien from another planet where villains aren't always out to get people. It's too meta. I mean, she doesn't have any experience with other planets. We see that Caw plans to convert zone leaders too, and at first I wondered if he meant converting them to his side, but then, oh right, the animal capsule. Why can't people in this comic just say Badnikify? Converting means something else. He's bitter about the Starlight Zone sacrifices being ignored. It's such a petty excuse. So does that mean that if people just humored them and said, thank you for your sacrifices or whatever, they'll stop doing evil things? One of the Splash Hill people, the hippie from earlier, calls Caw out saying that everyone has been through some heavy stuff, and she was turned into a badnik for 6 weeks during RBR, which is what people have apparently started calling the Rule by Robotnik era. And Caw says that people haven't suffered enough. I feel like this makes sense as something that a lot of people could feel because they're jealous that others haven't suffered as much as they have, especially people with PTSD. Sonic runs up to them in a blur and grabs Caw by the hand, dragging him away as the goons are confused about where he went. One of them humorously says, it was a blue blur, stupid. And when Tails shows up, flying above them, he says humorously, you should try looking up, while holding a black thing that I hope is a weapon since he expects them to talk this out. Sonic runs while Caw is putting his hand over his eyes, and Caw expects Sonic to crash with the two of them. So Caw's not scared of getting injured by Sonic crashing into something? Really? Though it speaks to the quality of the story that this is the first time the writing felt forced. He also insists that he's neither scared or awed by Sonic, calling him a hero sarcastically. And he asks where Sonic was during the siege. Sonic stands up to him while making him fling forwards. I was running through zones that couldn't protect themselves. But Tails. Sadly, he doesn't get to finish that train of thought. Tails says that it wasn't just him, as green planes show up above him. Burrowing Mobians had dug supply lines, their neighbors tried breakouts, and their children were safe on Miracle Planet, and asked them if they really want to fight over this. Caw still doesn't care, and Sonic says blah-de blah blah. You like fighting? Get a new hobby, smacking him in the face with his super peel out. I wish Caw didn't have stupid squiggles for eyes, that was weird. Tails looks really sad again at seeing a soldier with downcast eyes and another soldier who's handcuffed, implying that Caw's soldiers are regretful. The news reporter hippie, well I'm only calling her that because of her pretty necklace and orange jacket, she wants a press conference. But Sonic characteristically says, I never do one with politicians. I got a rep to keep as someone interesting. I love that line. It's so relatably snarky. And Tails is nervous, immediately wanting to make up for Sonic's rudeness, saying that he'll be happy to do the conference. Sonic sees a TV show that I guess is the press conference, but no, it doesn't show Tails and Miss Holt, so it's probably just people being interviewed to try to praise Splash Hill to get Sonic to move there. Sonic assumes that their pier is a dump, probably just because he's too attached to his own hill, which makes sense for him. And Eggman says he'd love to visit the beach because he misses it. But then Sonic says, well heck, let's move to Splash Hill then. Maybe the zone will get cool when we're there. Aw, he does this just to make Eggman happy. That's so weird to say. But Eggman is rid of the evil in him now, so it makes sense. Sonic's being considerate and mature. And while you could call it out of character for Fleetway Sonic, I prefer to think of his character development as just the natural result of him growing up. In the next story, we see Crimson Cobra Inc., Vector's lab, since Charmy bought it out earlier, I guess, with a text box briefly recapping that they lost Charmy. Mighty holds a stick and naturally complains about having to fetch it since it probably stinks. Vector says while doing science stuff with goggles that, from what he can gather, the Badnik used a dimensional destabilizer on Charmy, and by using one of his socks and his new perfected destabilizer, they should be able to recreate the accident and follow him. They all go into the tractor beam portal, and it's finally addressed that they don't like him, because Espio asks why they're even going to save him, as this is the most peace they've had in weeks. Weeks? Well, it's good that there was a time skip to explain how Vector had the time to make this portal. Vector says amusingly, well, besides the fact that he hasn't finished paying me back for that lab equipment he ruined. I love that line. Mighty lampshades that he hasn't even started paying him back. And that makes sense because Charmy's just a kid. He doesn't have a paycheck. Then Vector says, do you really want to leave Charmy alone to a strange, possibly dangerous dimension? Who knows what he might do to it? That was funny too. It was a subversion because everyone was assuming that he was just worried about Charmy, and he probably is, and I thought he might be too. But he's covering it up with the lame excuse. Because there's no way Charmy could be that harmful to it, could he? It's a good thing Vector assumed Charmy went to another dimension, rather than assuming what we all did, that he just vanished forever. That was lucky for Charmy. When they warp to another dimension, they hear someone say that he thought he had crushed his resistance and saying the word children. Then we see a ridiculous looking generic superhero team of birds saying to the bad guy, "Tweet, Titans, go." Don't remind me of that. It's bad enough my nephew watches it. That was out of place. The bad guy is immune to their laser attacks, and it's referenced that one of the ridiculous looking superheroes was his son and was taught dark magic by him. So as I wish that the Chaotix were doing something in the story, they finally do, as Vector wants to help. The idiot superheroes didn't actually have a plan other than fighting, and Trogon is acting like the most generic of generic villains with his unrealistic dialogue. Meh. The cloak guy says that his father's powers are based on emotions like his own, but instead of suggesting a plan to manipulate his father's emotions, like by showing him a cute puppy, he suddenly plans to amplify his power to the power of friendship and sacrifice himself to seal him away, even though he was literally the only member of those superheroes that I actually liked. He wasn't a stupid, cheesy guy in a dumb costume, and he was actually rebelling against his own father. At least Vector says, how about we call that Plan B, to try to stop him from doing that. And he says to Trogon, "Hey ugly, I've seen hairstyles scarier than you." I love this. I love how the villain stammers, "What?" And Vector tells his friends to follow his lead and jeer insults at him. So the bad guy's not being taken totally seriously, which is good considering how ridiculously stereotypical he is. It's self-aware of the comic's writing. Espio says that his optician's bill might be enormous, though Mighty has a weaker insult for the dumb brute he is in this comic, simply lying that he hits like a toddler. The villain gets a lot weaker from insecurity and starts crying, and says that he wasn't meant to be an intergalactic menace, with Vector lampshading, "The only thing terrible about you is your dialogue." I like that this surprisingly comedic outcome was foreshadowed properly, and we seem to get a quick and snappy resolution here, which is good, since I really didn't care about these new characters. I love one of the superheroes' responses saying it was an unorthodox tactic. Vector says that without Charmy they had plenty of pent-up aggression. I love that, so we're seeing an actual benefit to Charmy being around. Although in reality they should have no problem getting that aggression out with all the villains they're fighting as heroes. But maybe the special zone had more villains for them to fight every day. Out of nowhere, the purple cloaked guy already knows that these are the Chaotix, heroes who witnessed the death of the universe, and will save this world from under the shadow of the serpent. Wait, so these guys are all from the special zone? Because he said the universe, not a universe. He must be psychic to know all of this without witnessing it. The writer really liked this character, didn't he? Mighty's naturally confused and is told that the Techno Spirit will help them find Charmy, because pretty much everyone ends up there. I have a question. How did Vector know that Charmy would go to this particular zone out of the infinite amount of dimensions there are? Sure, it's a coincidence that they were brought to the right one with their dimensional destabilizer. If they indeed were brought to the right one. I like that SBO says, just so long as we don't get caught up in any more prophecy gibberish, as they thankfully ditch these superheroes. And he continues, trust Charmy to get stuck in the nuttiest dimension out there. There's so many lines I love in this issue. See, you don't need Flynn to have great self-aware dialogue. And even before Flynn, there were tons of quotable lines in Archie. I figured that they wouldn't get to find Charmy just an issue later. And that's for the better. It'd be a waste of an arc if it ended too quickly with a premise that significant. I just have to wonder how Charmy's doing. I'm missing half the story here. In the next story, we surprisingly cut to Cream instead of picking up where the pirates left off, not wanting to be a pirate anymore after all the fights she successfully lived through just fine. And it turns out that Cream has Archie Sonic comics to read in this universe. The text box shows smug arrogance about the fact that apparently Knuckles gliding by catching air in his dreadlocks is too far-fetched for some reason, but at least tries and fails to make up for it by pointing out how hypocritical it is, since Fleetway has had plenty of far-fetched ideas themselves. I complained about that pseudoscience explanation too, but come on, it doesn't symbolize Archie being terrible. There's a lot worse writing than that to point to. Anyways, it's because of Cream reading about how Knuckles can glide that she figures out how to glide too. I don't like this. It makes more sense that she can fly by spinning her not tail ears above her like Tails does. And she doesn't have dreadlocks. She should be flying, not gliding. She wonders if the policeman will help her, but predictably he doesn't. And I assumed he wouldn't because she wondered if he would help her, so he was begging for a subversion. The policeman at least calls her sweetheart and says spry, and explains that he has a dangerous criminal trapped inside, and she should only be here if she's a real police officer. Cream then gets a hat out of nowhere and lies that she is a cop. Good, we cut back to the pirates. Plunder tells Filch to deactivate the booby trap since he's an invincible ghost. They hear some bad sounds, and Filch finished the job. I love how useful he is with his ghost powers. They see a huge ravine, and to try to cross it, Plunder spins Simpson over his head in a circle and throws him by the leg, hoping that his stretching leg will let him pull Plunder over to him. And he tells Simpson to grab on over there. Why doesn't he just betray Plunder already? It feels like this is something that's been built up to since the very beginning. Is Simpson really too nice to do that when he worked with pirates no problem? He met him in a prison cell. Well, at least his cartoon powers have been used. We cut to Plunder being on the other side of the ravine, with Simpson all tied around something looking awful, and Filch points out that actually he didn't need to do that because there's a staircase down that side. Plunder says he just didn't notice it because of the bad luck curse he's planning to get rid of with the Maladjuster. Wait, Maladjuster? Wouldn't the obvious twist be that it'll just make his bad luck worse? It's interesting that he looks like a statue of a Hindu god, I think Shiva. Plunder can't call with an old-fashioned phone because the line had been disconnected, almost like nobody's used those phones for 40 years. And then out of nowhere, a janitor shows up in a building full of booby traps. And he says that the Maladjuster had to be fired after unprofessional remarks on social media. But fortunately, this isn't a Diabolus Ex Machina, because he tells Plunder to take some pills that'll eventually get his curse cleared right up. This is comedic. Pills to cure a curse. He's even told that if there's no change, he should call the number on the bottle. So that was easy. This comic really doesn't take anything seriously. I'm really relieved that he actually got his curse removed that quickly. I thought he'd never get it removed because Cream's absence would leave him prone to bad luck. But maybe the pills are a scam, who knows? We cut back to Cream with her foot on top of a criminal's head, bragging about how she taunted him off screen, and she salutes and says that she's reporting for playtime. I mean duty. Come on, am I really expected to believe that these cops actually think she's a cop? She's a kid! come on! This better just be them humoring her because they want a surprisingly competent little kid around. But even then, you'd think they'd be responsible adults and just try to get her back to her parents. Wouldn't she have been reported missing by now? Though I guess they forgot what the missing persons report had her look like. And the story ends with a meddling cop saying, "Look, I told you, I don't care if you are a feared sky pirate. If you park on double yellows, you pay the fine." What double yellows? Wait, is that a giant yellow road with the sidewalks around? It's supposed to be double yellows? I just see a yellow road. You'd think a pirate would just kill her, not take her seriously. It's a shame, I'm not sure who wrote these stories. I want to credit them, but maybe if they hadn't changed their web interface, I would have been able to just see the writers credited at the top of the page above the issue. Well, whoever wrote these stories did a great job. They were charming and had tons of fantastic lines that kept surprising me with the self-awareness and comedic moments. The first story was about Sonic and Tails going to fight a bad guy named Caw, who's riled up his Starlight Zone army to badnickify people because he's jealous that they didn't suffer under badnicks as much as they did. At least he has an excuse, even if it's a lame one. Of course, Caw gets beaten by Sonic, and what's really the highlight of this issue is how Sonic and Tails' dynamic is. Sonic realizes that Tails has gotten more confident, and instead of simply being annoyed and arrogant, he compliments him and reminds him that Tails has earned his respect, and he should be cocky. It's a sweet moment between them. And another way that we see that Sonic's growing up is that just because Eggman wants to go to the beach, he agrees to move his base to Splash Hill Dome. It feels so wrong calling a good Kintobor Eggman, but what else am I supposed to call him? We already have a Kintobor. The Kintobor AI would be a dehumanizing name for the AI, just as bad as Kintobor Computer. And I can't exactly call him Robotnik. That name doesn't sound heroic either. I love the twins of the same wavelength dynamic these two have with each other. It tries to make up for the fact that they don't have that deep personalities, like with Lyco and Lita. And I wish we had it a lot earlier, but having two characters with the same name is a problem. The second story is about the Chaotix going to another dimension to find Charmy with barely any objections to it, with tons of charming lines in the meantime, as Vector is more worried about what kind of trouble Charmy will cause to the other zone. Sadly, they see some ridiculously stereotypical superheroes there, in an out-of-place parody of Teen Titans Go. But fortunately, there's at least one good character among them, a badass purple-cloaked guy with dark magic who's rebelling against his father. And I love that their magic comes from their emotions too, for the added complexity. And fortunately, since I had no respect for the one-dimensional stereotypical villain, he isn't taken seriously at all, and is defeated by being insulted until he cries and gives up. All thanks to Vector getting the common sense idea that I thought up immediately, sparing us the one cool new character having to sacrifice himself. And it's also a good thing the Chaotix ditched these guys after being told where to go next, because they were a spotlight stealing squad. And the final story has Plunder get the curse removed surprisingly easily, or at least he gets pills for the curse by a janitor in an oddly comedic twist that wasn't led up to at all. I thought it'd be purely a mystical thing, like a genie helping him. I thought Plunder's bad luck curse would make this a doomed adventure because he stupidly didn't try to get Cream back, but his recklessness paid off. It was cool that Filch made himself useful deactivating the traps. I just wish Cream hadn't wasted 2 entire pages on worthless filler. I mean, come on! Am I really supposed to buy that the cops thought she was an actual cop? Really? And since nothing gets to come of it in this issue, it really just feels like it's wasted comic space on unfunny gags. I think we would have been better off having that comic space be more of Plunder's journey so he'd feel more like he actually earned getting that cure. That's what I assumed would happen because that would be common sense to write like that. I'm pleasantly surprised that this issue is even out. It took a while for it to come out. I had to wait months for it. And this was long after I reviewed most of the comic. So I didn't think there would be any more issues. I'm glad there is though. Seeing the two Kintobors together and how Eggman's feeling regretful for his past really helps make up for the big problem I had last time with him becoming Kinto 4 years before he's supposed to in the future. As arbitrary as it was, at least it happened.